¿Cómo están? Muy buenas noches, bienvenidos en el radar de ADN Noticias. Seguimos muy de cerca la situación en Colombia, lamentable esta tragedia que ya cobra más, la cifra sube a más de 180 personas fallecidas y más de 1,600 heridos en Quibdó, en Pereira, Manizales, en Cali, por este sismo de 7.4 que sacudió ayer a Colombia. Pues rescatistas están trabajando a marchas forzadas. Sabemos que las 72 horas son cruciales para rescatar a personas con vida de entre los escombros. Lamentablemente, Cali, Valle de Cauca, pues sigue siendo una de las ciudades con más víctimas fatales y la sigue Pereira. Así es la situación. Las imágenes pues son verdaderamente impresionantes de este sismo que ha sacudido lamentablemente a Colombia. Y pues seguimos de cerca la situación, las labores de rescate, pues Colombia recibe ayuda internacional. El presidente de la Espriella, actual presidente de Colombia, dice que cuentan con los equipos, necesitan otro tipo de ayuda. El presidente Nayib Bukele dice que está enviando ya aviones con ayuda. Esta tarde lo dijo en su cuenta oficial, en la red social en X. Y pues estamos atentos a lo que allí ocurre.
Es el momento en el que el suelo se tambalea en Colombia. Suenan las alarmas de los autos, las estructuras comienzan a desprenderse. Una mujer se aferra a lo que tiene enfrente. Un segundo es suficiente para pasar del desconcierto a la desesperación. Un edificio se derrumba.
Se acordó declarar la correspondiente situación de emergencia. No los vamos a dejar solos, están en nuestro corazón y les vamos a tender la mano con toda decisión. El gobierno nacional mantiene desplegadas todas sus capacidades para proteger la vida, atender a las comunidades afectadas y llevar ayuda a cada territorio que se necesite.
El terremoto de magnitud 7.4 sacudió gran parte del país. Su epicentro fue en San José del Palmar, en el departamento de Chocó. Pero la fuerza del movimiento alcanzó Manizales, Buenaventura, Cali y Pereira. En esta última ciudad, el colapso de un edificio céntrico registra por ahora buena parte de las víctimas mortales reportadas en la región.
Se presentaron diferentes colapsos de vivienda en la ciudad y pues reporte de personas desaparecidas hay.
Hasta el momento se reportan aeropuertos con operaciones suspendidas. En general, la vida cotidiana se puso en pausa para concentrarse en el desarrollo de la emergencia. La dimensión de la tragedia no cabe todavía en un número, pero se percibe en los teléfonos que suenan sin respuesta, en los que buscan entre los escombros de lo que hasta hace unas horas era su casa, y en las familias que esperan una noticia que puede cambiarles la vida. Y mientras, continúa la búsqueda y aún queda mucho por hacer. El presidente Abelardo de la Espriella trabaja en atender la situación. Un primer reto de emergencia que se suma en los primeros días de su administración a la responsabilidad de reconstruir y dar respuesta a un país golpeado por la tragedia. Con información de Salma Domínguez, Azteca Noticias.
Mira, hace 2 semanas tuve la oportunidad de conversar con un experto, un geólogo venezolano, el doctor Frank Audemars. Él es reconocido experto en tectónica activa y tiene una amplia trayectoria en estudio de fallas activas y amenaza sísmica en América Latina, y conversábamos sobre la falla de Boconó. Él hizo un estudio, una investigación en 2017 donde hablaba de esta falla de Boconó, y en 5 de junio aproximadamente de este año, él comentó sobre una actividad sísmica irregular en esa falla, y 19 días después pues ocurre esta tragedia en Venezuela que ha cobrado la vida de más de 20,000 personas. Es una verdadera tragedia. En ese momento, hace 2 semanas, le comenté en relación a sus estudios, en relación al estrés que tiene esta falla o a la carga de energía que tiene esta falla, conocida también en inglés como estrés, si se podría así como él vio esta actividad irregular 19 días antes del sismo, y vemos 7 años después de este estudio que él hizo en 2017 que ocurre este sismo por la falla de Boconó, que cruza a Ecuador y también a Colombia. Conversamos sobre los riesgos, qué países podrían estar en riesgo, y esto me dijo. Publicó el 5 de junio, de hecho hizo una publicación en Facebook donde usted pues veía que había mayores niveles de sismicidad. La falla Boconó pasa a través de Colombia y a través de Ecuador, tengo entendido. ¿Tienen riesgo estos países? ¿Se puede de alguna manera no predecir, pero saber que próximamente podría haber un sismo?
Pongámoslo de una forma bien sencilla. Todo país que esté surcado por fallas geológicas activas, generadoras de terremotos, tiene que vivir con prevención día al día.
Bien, en los últimos meses llama la atención que se ha registrado sismos a nivel internacional, más aproximadamente 10 sismos de una magnitud mayor a 7, y ha habido una intensa actividad volcánica. ¿Esto es normal? De acuerdo a la estadística, no es normal. Deberíamos preocuparnos. Precisamente para conversar de ese tema, recibo en el espacio a la doctora Lilian Burkhardt. Ella es geóloga y especialista en tectónica y riesgo sísmico. Ha estudiado la falla de San Andrés también y los procesos geológicos que podrían desencadenar grandes terremotos en California. Bienvenida.
Thank you.
You recently published a document, a research document about the San Andreas and San Jacinto fault system, and it's the earthquake cycle stress accumulation. What are your findings on that?
So what we modeled it's a computer model. So we put in 1,000 years of earthquake history into a computer model to see if we could see a pattern of high stress levels. So we could see a threshold, so to say, where we could identify when the fault would rupture again in the future. And what we found is that the San Andreas fault is now at levels that are higher than we've seen in all of these 1,000 years that we examined. They're either at the levels where they usually rupture in large earthquakes, meaning magnitude 7 or higher, or it's even in some parts exceeding that level.
So there's a high risk because we saw it in Venezuela with the Boconos fault. There also seismic data that show that there was inconsistencies on the seismic data, and also there was a high energy trapped. That suggests to geologists that it could release that energy anytime soon, and it happened on the 24th of June. It's not possible to predict exact date that an earthquake of that magnitude is going to happen, but it means that there could be a risk that the San Andreas fault release this energy in a big earthquake anytime soon. Let's say the next month, the next years.
Well, there is a chance that we've known this for a long time now, that because the last large rupture on the San Andreas fault, in the southern San Andreas fault, especially near Los Angeles, was in 1857. So it's been a while, and the stress has been building up continuously through the plate motions. So that stress needs to be released. And what people always get kind of wrong is that they think that smaller earthquakes release that energy, but actually only a large earthquake will actually release that energy as much as possible. So we are expecting a large earthquake within the next 30 years for sure. We cannot say if it's tomorrow or in a month or in 10 years. A lot of people always say, oh, I've been living here for a long time, and they've always said that there's going to be a large earthquake, and it hasn't happened yet. But we have the risk, and the USGS assesses that risk to be at 75% for a large earthquake within the next 30 years. But we cannot ever predict an earthquake. It's more of a forecast for the next 30 years.
It's quite difficult because we would like to predict them to save lives, but I reckon there is a lot of data and also the development of artificial intelligence And since you're doing a lot of research on these and also the data for the past 1,000 years on this fault, is there any chance that the advancement of artificial intelligence could lead to data processing that could manage or could lead us to predict earthquakes with a lot of accuracy?
Well, I would never say predict. It's more like a weather forecast. We can we can forecast the weather, but not really predict it precisely. But it's a lot easier to send sensors into the atmosphere and watch the clouds and temperatures and pressures than it is to put sensors into the earth. So we have limited data available for the crust of the earth, and that's why it's very hard to make these kind of forecasts and put more data into the models. But I have a lot of faith that now with artificial intelligence, we're getting closer to actually have a better forecast window than just, these 30 or 50 years that we're always talking about.
I understand. I mean, there's a lot of concern around the world about the earthquakes that have been happening, more than 7 in the Richter scale, around the world. There was in February the 27th in Malaysia, 7.1, April, Japan, 7.4. Also, June the 7th, Philippines, 7.8. There are 10 so far in 2026, and there is also a lot of volcano activity. Is there? Is it normal? Should we worry about this?
Well, actually, statistically speaking, it's a normal level of activity. It just happened. These earthquakes recently just happened more together in a cluster, and that's why. And then also these studies coming out saying the San Andreas fault is highly stressed, and other faults, as we've seen in Venezuela, are also highly stressed. And that's why we are sort of more alert or have more attention on these earthquakes. But actually, these 10 earthquakes so far this year, this is a normal number to expect every year. We can expect in the past 10 years, we've had up to 24 of these large earthquakes per year all around the world. So that's not an unusual number. What's more unusual is that it's, in very populated areas, and that unfortunately there's have been a lot of casualties.
Yes, and we can see it now in Colombia. Still, casualties, the number of casualties are still increasing, unfortunately. And there is also a lot of volcano activity. Is that normal too?
Yes, so as the plates are moving, also magma is moving up. So that's also a normal level of activity that we're having.
So what should we look after if we're seeing this? I mean, we're in Mexico, and this is a seismic country, and we're part of the Ring of Fire, if I'm correct, that crosses the whole world. I mean, I do not know, don't remember how many countries. Should we worry here in Mexico, since we saw, I mean, the Poconos fault doesn't have anything to do with the earthquake in Colombia, although they share the same fault. But I believe this happened for another fault, which is closer to the Pacific. But it's worrying to think that maybe Mexico could have a big earthquake anytime soon.
Well, I wouldn't say anytime soon. It's, of course, we cannot predict them, but we always have to remember we're living on a sphere, so everything is kind of connected. But then also at the same time, it's not in the detailed sense. So these faults are not actually interconnected, but it just hasn't happened in the past, years that we've had earthquakes on these particular faults. And also that's why a lot of settlements have developed in these regions, because our lives are 100 years, but the earth, we move in millions and billions of years when we're talking about the earth's crust and how it develops and how it moves, or thousands of years. And our settlements a lot of them are not that old. So we've settled in areas where there have been large earthquakes at other intervals, like 150 or 200 years. So we're not used to that activity happening where we're living. And that's also a reason why, we're seeing these earthquakes in populated areas now.
What are the findings of your last research study and document that actually capture your attention?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? You broke up for me.
What are the findings of your last research, the research of the San Andreas Fault and San Jacinto system, the earthquake cycle of stress? Which are the findings, besides the stress accumulated in the past 1,000 years, which are the findings impressed you?
So our findings were we were looking at an area called Cajon Pass, where a lot of infrastructure is going through, actually, aqueducts, for instance, that supply the whole Los Angeles area with water. And it is a very critical point where two faults meet. The San Jacinto and the San Andreas fault meet at this junction right there. But they do not meet at the surface, but they share stress together. So that means they could rupture together, as they have ruptured together in the past. But we haven't seen that in recent history. The last time this happened was in 1812. And back then there were maybe, 1,000 people living in that area. And now we have 10 million people living in that area. So it's a different state now. And the stresses are high. So there is a rupture coming within the next 30 years. And we just have to be prepared for this. And California has prepared quite well for this with quite strict building codes. So the buildings, there will be damage during such a large earthquake, but they are built according to this building code so they won't collapse on people and cause as many casualties as we've seen in other countries, for instance. You just have to make sure that when you build a new building, that it's up to seismic codes.
I believe there are chances of a volcanic activity in the coast of California, in the ocean. And also, I would like to know if this is true, this is accurate. And also, because there could be an earthquake, but there also could be volcanic activity that could cause a tsunami. Is there a big chance, if there is an earthquake, that you have a big tsunami also hitting California? And also, if you have volcanic activity in the ocean, could you also have a big tsunami hitting the California coast?
It's unlikely, because San Andreas Fault is a strike slip fault, and tsunamis happen when, one plate moves up, and that causes the wave, right? But the San Andreas Fault moves sideways past one another, the plates. So these fault lines do not really cause large tsunamis, as we've seen in Japan, for instance. These are caused by subduction zones, as you have further down in South America, for instance, along the Chilean coast and further down, not the San Andreas Fault. So the San Andreas Fault itself also could not rupture in a massive, large rupture. So anything over 8 magnitude is unlikely. It's more in the range of a 7.5 to 7.9 that we can expect for a large San Andreas Fault rupture. And a tsunami of that size is very unlikely for California.
Okay. Dr. Booker, thank you so much for being with us in El Radar.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Dr. Lilian Burkhardt. She's a professor and also a researcher in the Bern University. Es investigadora de la Universidad de Berna en Suiza. A todos ustedes, muchísimas gracias por habernos acompañado.